Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, February 7th, 2022. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Ryan Cooper, national correspondent at The Week, author of How Are You Going to Pay for That? Smart Answers to the Dumbest Questions in Politics. Also on the program today, U.S. COVID deaths top 900,000. Daily death still over 2,500 as Omicron infections slowly across the country recede. Meanwhile, Russia has now amassed 130,000 troops at the Ukrainian border as talks continue to avert war. Government funding ends in 11 days. House prepping another punt, i.e. continuing resolution. Speaking of House members, Jim Clyburn pushing an anti-union Supreme Court nominee super hard. Heavily invested in that outcome. Republicans all in with January 6th being a legitimate political discourse. Meanwhile, Mike Pence unsheaths the dagger. Republicans suing against mail-in ballots in swing states across the country. However, the North Carolina Supreme Court strikes down the Republican gerrymander there. Spotify standing by Joe Rogan amidst his apologies for past racist remarks. And rest in peace to Todd Gitlin, early SDS president. All this and more on today's Majority Report. It is Monday. Joining me, as she does every day, not the least of which the first day of the week, Emma Vigeland. Hello, Emma.
Hello, Sam.
Let's do a shofar. I just got a IM from Brooklyn Sue suggesting a shofar to mark the passing of Todd Gitlin. He was one of the earliest, maybe number 2 president of the SDS back in the day. Led, I think, some of the first anti-war, anti-Vietnam protests of that organization and anti-apartheid protests of that organization back in the mid-'60s. I knew him personally a little bit through Air America. Maybe I'd interviewed him a couple of times. And around Occupy, he was doing some work and he reached out and we had a couple of drinks over the course of a couple of months. Good guy, very, very invested in left-wing politics. Had a lot of, I think, issues with various strains that came out of the SDS. Certain inevitability, as far as I could tell, with that. But passed away after, I think, what was a fairly brief illness starting in December. But this is for Todd Gitlin. 79 years old. All right, let's go into, we got a lot to talk about today, but let's start with, I don't know, is this the, I feel like the 2024 Republican primary started some time ago, but it is really starting to heat up. And what's interesting here is that I think Mike Pence must have a sense that he's not going to be Donald Trump's running mate. And if you're not going to be Donald Trump's running mate, then you might as well be his rival. I think it's one of those situations for Mike Pence.
Be the rival or the people who my followers want to kill or all those sorts of things. Pick your poison.
And I think this is probably more a function of Mike Pence getting a sense that he cannot win over certain elements of the Trump base than a sense that Trump is in some way weakened.
Well, he's in a no-win situation, right? They're all mad at him for not overturning the election. So you might as well, I guess, lean into it a little bit because you're already excommunicated by that.
I think that's what it is. Yeah. And I think, and you should, I've seen a little bit of this, not a lot, but the analysis that this is Mike Pence seeing a weakness in Donald Trump. No, I think it is more of what Emma has said, which is the die is cast. Pence is not going to win over those people who were chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." My hope is he wins over no one else.
It seems like that makes sense. You're not going to win over the people that wanted to kill you.
I mean, if Donald Trump
logically,
if Donald Trump came out the next day or came out tomorrow and said, "I got to tell you, actually, I've looked at it, and Mike was in a tough spot, and so he's okay. I'm good with the God Squad people." That's what he needed Pence for, and but here's Mike Pence at giving a speech to the Federalist Society in Buena Vista, Florida. And interesting, he's doing it to the Federalist Society, sort of in many respects, reminding him like it was my peeps who were really concerned about the Supreme Court justice. And so, part of that credit goes to McConnell, who opened the door. And then the other part of that credit goes to me, who delivered those folks who want to turn this into a theocracy, and knew one of the ways to do that was to get 2 or 3 Supreme Court picks. And alas, but here he is.
But there are those in our party who believe that as the presiding officer over the joint session of Congress, that I possess unilateral authority to reject electoral college votes. And I heard this week that President Trump said I had the right to overturn the election.
Pause it.
President Trump is wrong.
Pause it for 1 second. Now, I find it hard to believe that Mike Pence heard this for the first time this week.
I was about to say, did he just wake up out of like a 14-month coma?
Honestly, they must have taken a poll or something in terms of like his Pence's likability, or maybe there was funding shifted from somewhere. Maybe somebody from the Koch brothers organization came to Pence and said, "We're willing to give you this type of cash if you're willing to try and take 4 or 5%, 8% from that solid 35 that he has."
That's very unfair. I mean, when you see him speak, he oozes sincerity. He would never do something like that.
Mike Pence, yes. What's also interesting is to watch, like, he is adopting George Bush's cadence.
Yeah.
And sort of like the...
he does the, like, I'm very sincere squint that I cannot stand.
That is actually media training that they tell you.
It's like
Bill
a news
Clinton
anchor
had
thing.
that too.
Yeah.
It is a way of showing people that you're really, really caring about them.
I'm listening.
Tell me more. Okay, let's hear more of Mike Pence.
And I heard this week that President Trump said I had the right to overturn the election. But President Trump is wrong. I had no right to overturn the election. The presidency belongs to the American people and the American people alone. And frankly, there is no idea more un-American than the notion that any one person could choose the American president. Under the Constitution, I had no right to change the outcome of our election. And Kamala Harris will have no right to overturn the election when we beat them in 2024.
Well, then you can make it scary, because then the Democrats can do it, and you know who would overturn it.
Kamala.
Who's gonna beat them, Mike?
That's right. We. I don't know if we are, Mike. I wonder, it wouldn't surprise me if Pence just goes to DeSantis and said, like, I'll be your number 2.
Yeah.
I got another 8 years. Like, this is, Pence has got to be like, I don't want a job where I actually have to work.
And he feels so much cozier as a number 2, right? He's like such a authoritarian lackey. He needs a strong man to follow. He
also, again, can regain his position as the most powerful theocrat in the country. So there's Mike Pence coming out. It'll be interesting to see if there's any reaction to that amongst the wingnuts.
And by the way, about DeSantis, I don't even know if DeSantis would take him. He's kind of damaged goods at this point.
Oh, Mike, retread, Mike. Retread, Mike.
Maybe you can...
Sloppy seconds. Sloppy seconds there, DeSantis. Sorry, Ron.
I found out your name means like something like pennies.
How awesome would it be if he was like, I'm running against... Now, you don't declare who your nominee, your vice president is until after the nomination. But it's Ron and re-Ron. All right.
There you go.
Maybe Kristi Noem will take you, Mike.
Here we go. Folks, a couple of sponsors for today's program. We all deserve to know what we're putting in our bodies and why. Well, Ritual, which is the brand of my multivitamin, offers clean, vegan-friendly multivitamin. It's formulated with high-quality nutrients in a bioavailable forms that your body can actually use. You're not going to find any sugars, no GMOs, major allergens, no synthetic fillers or artificial colorants. Plus, the fresh taste and delayed release capsule makes taking your vitamins easy. Ritual delivers high-quality nutrients, including vitamin D3, in just 2 daily pills. Multivitamin should contain key nutrients in forms that your body can actually use to help fill the gaps in diet. No shady extras. It's available for women, for men, and for teens. Ritual multivitamins are scientifically developed to help support different life stages. And, well, without giving away too much, I am using the over 50 multivitamin. And for me, I will say this. There have been different times in my life where it's been suggested to me by my doctor to take vitamins, a deficiency in vitamin D, or one or two others, but the D has always been the main one that has dogged me.
D is important these days.
Super important, but well, not just, I don't know what the latest is in terms of COVID, but basically they say D is really important for maintaining, I think is it prostate cancer? I don't know what it is, but it's helpful. And for me, what would always happen is I'd go get my multivitamin, I would take it religiously, the bottle would get empty, and then I would forget to refill it, and then boom, like 6 years later, I'm like, God, I almost had it.
Yeah.
That has changed. And why? Because with Ritual, your multivitamins are delivered to your door every month with free shipping. It's easy to start, snooze, or cancel your subscription at any time. And in terms of Ritual, if you don't love it after your first month, you can cancel. They'll refund your first order. But for me, like, the big thing is my vitamin D levels, according to my doctor, good. It's really, I don't know, maybe the first time was probably a year ago. He said, like, what's going on? Mm-hmm. And it's because I don't run out of vitamins. When I do, I get my next one. You would think that wouldn't be such a big deal, but it is for me. Get your key nutrients without the BS. Ritual is offering my listeners 10% off you during your first 3 months. Visit ritual.com/majority to start your ritual today. Also, I've been using, Grove now for a couple of years, more than that. That was my go-to during the lockdown.
Right.
What is Grove Collaborative? Well, they're basically a one-stop market for cleaning and I guess what they call beauty products.
Yeah.
Is that what they call it?
Yeah.
Personal hygiene products. And it's all green stuff. So you don't want to use single-use plastics. By 2025, Grove is going to be 100%. All of their products are going to be 100% plastic-free. Laundry care, hand soaps, dish soaps. Grove carries hundreds of products aimed at replacing single-use plastics across every room of your home and your head-to-toe personal care routine. That's what I was looking for, personal care routine. Grove's concentrated cleaners in refillable glass bottles are friendlier to the planet and twice as effective as the leading natural brands. And over 2 million households already rely on Grove for safe formulas and refillable packaging that never compromises on performance. My kids are not small anymore, but if they, this would have been a blessing.
Right.
Had my kids been tiny, when they were babies, you're really uptight about this stuff. But I use the Grove orange, maybe it's orange rosemary or orange something concentrate. I've got multiple bottles of that I spray around. I use now every one of my hand pumps is refillable hand soap. The kids get the pineapple foaming kind. All Grove products. I also still like 7th generation that they have because
right.
I like 90% of the stuff I get scent free. But they also have toilet paper, bamboo style toilet paper. I mean, it's good stuff. Go to grove.com/majority today. Get a free gift set worth up to $50 with your first order. Plus shipping is fast and free. Get started right now at grove.com/majority. That's grove.com/majority. Check it out. They have all sorts of products there, and they are much better for the environment. All right, and as always, we'll put those links in the YouTube and podcast description, and it's your support that makes this show possible. If you want the free show, free of commercials, become a member. Join themajorityreport.com. And I want to welcome back to the program Ryan Cooper, national correspondent at The Week, author of How Are You Going to Pay for That? Smart Answers to the Dumbest Questions in Politics. I really like that. What is the subtitle, Ryan? Thanks for joining us. Really appreciate that.
Glad to be here. I will have to confess I didn't write the subtitle, so I can't confirm necessarily that the answers are smart, but I hope they're smart.
Well, but the questions are certainly dumb.
Yes, they are.
As long as we can agree on that. Here with Emma Vigeland, of course. So let's just start with let's start with, and I feel like, I have had over the years many debates with libertarians about a lot of the topics that you cover in this book. But let's start with that first sort of, I guess, myth, or what you call a self-immolating idea that has really woven itself into the fabric of our political consciousness in this country.
Yeah, so that the idea of what Karl Polanyi would say, the self-regulating market, just sort of commonsensical notion that the economy is this pre-political entity, that the economy is something that you need to sacrifice yourself to, and thus the sort of ironic name of the book, how are you going to pay for that? Because the implicit assumption behind that question is that the government is an imposition on the economy, that you need to allocate all of your spending with taxes beforehand, because basically the government is a sort of like quasi illegitimate imposition on the economy, which is created through the private actions of individuals, specifically business owners usually. And the fundamental reality, to simplify it only a little bit, is to say that the economy is a government program. It's created and sustained at every turn by government policy. And most fundamentally, it's a collective enterprise. Everybody has a role to play in it. And there's always choices that can be made, and so the libertarian move there that you're talking about is to limit the terms of debate such that their preferred conclusion is automatically produced. It's never like, is government borrowing good or bad? It's what is the best way to reduce it? It's begging the question in the technical logic sense. The libertarians love the list of fallacies on Wikipedia, and there's one for you. You're assuming the conclusion in the argument. It's a dishonest presentation. And so I'm trying to it's a pretty obvious idea once you sort of really think about it for a minute. Obviously, the government has something to do with the dollar existing, and banks and roads and bridges and trains and all the stuff that it builds, and the military. These things are all important, of course. But when you really think about it, it's hard to internalize, given the amount of basically propaganda that we all sort of internalize or sort of nurtured from birth about this sort of stuff. Even today, you crack it open, the New York Times or the Washington Post, and you'll often see stuff about how, well, inflation's bad, and that means we're all just going to have to accept a recession because there's only one way to handle these sort of things. And so I'm trying to give people a nice, concise little way of avoiding that pitfall.
What is the trajectory? I'm trying to think of what the trajectory of this idea that the economy is, exists in nature, and the U.S. government decides to engage in the economy, and our societies decide to engage in the economy as if it's like the weather. And, the best we can do is occasionally have an umbrella and be able to tell you that rain may be coming or not. And that's about it, as opposed to we own the weather machine. And we, like you said, you've just gone through all the list of things that we engage in. We also constrain the human relationships. And we've changed that from time to time within this country, right? We've imposed income taxes. We've passed Taft-Hartley, which fundamentally changed the way that labor and capitalists and management deal with each other, and not to the benefit of labor, I should add. But how do you track this? Was there what's been the ebb and flow of the understanding of the economy like that, as opposed to the way that you're arguing, which is that the economy is a political decision, essentially?
I think it's, there's a certain sense in which it's a naturally appealing idea. I think people kind of can stumble into it of their own volition, because it kind of is the case that in terms of the individual, you really can't do anything to change the direction of the national or much less the global economy. It really kind of is like the weather for an individual person. You can maybe make some choices here and there, especially if you're a member of a collective organization like a union. But you can't change whether a history degree is less valuable than a computer science degree. That's just a function of sort of how things work. But I think that the major explanation for this, and the reason why it's been so hammered into people's heads over the years, is that it's very convenient for rich people, basically, for that to be the sort of conventional wisdom in the economy. And this goes all the way back to the Industrial Revolution in Britain. You portray an economy which is incredibly brutal towards workers, you know, relies to a significant extent on child labor, you know, or sending like pregnant women down into the coal mines, as used to happen in the early industrial Britain, as that's just like a thing that it's just a kind of natural and unavoidable feature of the way that, you know, human society functions. Then the people who are making tons of money off the labor of those workers don't have to deal with any inconvenient regulations or unions that might, you know, obstruct their wealth and their, I think even more importantly, their control of the business. You know, the most convincing argument, and it was something I cite repeatedly in the book, is this essay, the Political Aspects of Full Employment by Mikhail Kalecki. And it basically goes into this, you know, this attitude in great detail. The fact that, you know, even when you're having a crisis like the Great Depression, business, generally they oppose efforts to deal with mass unemployment. And this is because it creates political changes that they don't like. You know, if the government figures out that they can, you know, they can create jobs whenever they want, and they can tax people whenever they want, and they can even, you know, expropriate property if they want, that really dethrones the, you know, the capitalist business owner from his place at the top of the social pyramid, both in terms of riches and in terms of social status and self-regard and so forth. And that, you know, I think really explains how persistent this has been. You know, that it's really incredible to think about the rise of neoliberalism after like almost the exact same ideas almost destroyed you know, all of Western civilization in the Great Depression. You know, Hitler was a product of the Depression. The worst war in history. And yet, you know, 40, 50 years later, you have people just going right back down the exact same track of deregulation and all the rest of it. So it's, you know, it's a strong idea, and it really, you know, even to this day, I think holds a great purchase over the minds of elites and the mass population together.
Has there ever been a time, I mean, is it like the only time, like I'm thinking, at least in the 20th century, may have been sometime around like the end of the 60s, where, you know, people were saying everybody's a Keynesian now on some level, was an acknowledgement that we can make decisions in the context of, you know, regardless of what you think about Keynesianism or if it's a, you know, solution, on some level, there's some acknowledgement there that we have control over the economy in some fashion or another. But we should, you know, I also should say, like, you know, people assume like, you know, a 40-hour work week. They assume, you know, like a time and a half. It's assumption that kids or pregnant women don't go into mines, or kids don't work in factories. And that was just not the case. It was just a decision that we made that, like, we're not going to do this, and we can make other decisions, I guess, is really what it is. But it's been also both parties. I mean, Bill Clinton in the 90s was saying, you know, we're going to make government leaner and we're going to get out of the way, essentially, after Reagan. And so both parties have participated in this delusion. Oddly enough, only when Barack Obama said you didn't build that was some like tepid attempt at sort of acknowledging that, like, hey, wait a second. We have what you call collective economics.
Yeah, I would say you're definitely right about the post-New Deal period. Like basically from the mid-30s to about the mid-70s, you had a consensus that some kind of economic management was not only necessary, but unavoidable. And so, yeah, you had a lot, like a vast regulatory state, a huge antitrust system, you know, ways like the realizing that the market even the market institutions don't run themselves. These requires state policy for competition to happen, and especially competition to happen along the things that you want. The competition about price and quality, rather than competition just trying to run the other guy out of business and then set up a monopoly and gouge the supplier or the customer. I think maybe the most striking example is capital controls in the Bretton Woods system, which is kind of a hodgepodge, but that was so deeply implicated in the Great Depression. The flows of financial capital, just hot money going from one country to another, was how the contagion of the financial crisis in 1929, spread from New York to Europe and back again. And was recognized as incredibly dangerous by virtually everyone. Like, no serious economist would deny that. You could say cross-border investment, that's one thing, but having hot, speculative derivative trading and stuff going across borders, that is just like totally unacceptable. And there were very tight capital controls that lasted for about 30 years. Until Bretton Woods was broken apart and most of these regulations were like picked off one by one. The other thing to say about that, though, is that, the reason I call it a self-immolating idea is because it's totally impossible to have an actual self-regulating market. Like, all economies are run with choices. And that was true with Britain in the 19th century. It was true neoliberalism in the, the 1990s. These were things that were set up with structures of policy. They required, active management at every point. And, often the management of, the most coercive parts of the government, namely the police and the army. The way that the British set up their, great economic empire was with, gunboats and invading armies and colonial administrators and stuff to, dispossess the, Indian cloth manufacturers and force China to take in lots of opium and basically destroy the Chinese empire in the process. And, so it's even kind of hard to think about, but you have to keep in mind that like this idea of it even being possible to like deregulate the economy in any serious way is basically out of the question, unless you're talking about a descent into total anarchy or something, a zombie apocalypse. There's your deregulation. But otherwise, you're just talking about what choices do you want to make? And you can make lots of different ones. Some of them are bad, even sometimes, you can make bad regulations, of course. You can make bad choices in that direction. It's not, like just because it's a regulation means it's good. But like, there's no way of evading the trap, and anybody who says that, like Clinton, saying like, oh, the era of big government is over and we're all Reaganized now. All the rest of that rhetoric is just a way of camouflaging the political agenda of somebody, usually, the business class, typically.
And camouflaging the self-serving nature of it too. Like, I mean, without my I guess big picture question to you is, without like these shocks to the system, like the Great Depression or the recession, which is like when you see some of the cracks in this, like Sam was saying with Obama's hinting at like maybe abandoning the orthodoxy of neoliberalism, and like before, in the wake of the Great Depression, this more widespread embrace of Keynesian economics. Isn't it always going to revert once things are fairly stable and the power brokers kind of like maybe regulate themselves to a larger extent under capitalism, or there is more regulation? Then once things get a little better, okay, it's time to go back to free markets. It's time to loot a little bit more for ourselves. Is that not kind of, it sounds a little nihilistic, but under free market capitalism, and if we're so committed to that, isn't that kind of how things are going to go?
I think it depends. the sort of general conclusion I have, to a lot of questions like this is like, it depends. But it's an open political issue. It's a jump ball, you might say. And you definitely do see right now an attempt to reimpose the old, hegemonic system of the post 2008, because that was so good for owners of businesses. You got basically free profits. Workers' wages were flat. Interest rates were low. Growth was terrible, but no, they don't care about that kind of thing. And this high inflation and possibly higher interest rates coming up, and especially low unemployment and wages shooting up at the bottom, as worker shortages in all kinds of industries, people hate that. And so there has been a definite resort to this kind of naturalizing rhetoric that like, oh, inflation is proof that we have offended the gods of the self-regulating market. It's time to pull our horns in and increase interest rates, and basically, the camouflaged agenda there is we need to beat the workers back into submission. The Reddit anti-work stuff is being covered on CNN. We can't be having this kind of thing get out of hand. Much less, imagine, the thing that they fear the most in the business community would be a mass union organizing drive that really takes fire across multiple industries. Because they know that once people get some confidence and start thinking that well, I don't just have to accept my lot in life, then that's a real threat to the status, the power, and the income of the business class. And so I would say it really depends on what Biden does, what Democrats do, what people in the media. It's a thing that it's a narrative that can be pushed, and we've seen it be very successful. But on the other hand, I think that 2008 was took the shine off of deregulated Wall Street for sure. And we've seen in the pandemic, it's like, oh, when things are bad, we could just send everyone in the country just about a check for $1,200, and it was actually fine. A little inflation later, but there are other countries that didn't stimulate like that are still having inflation now for whatever reason. And so I think that if we can preserve the memory, especially of the pandemic responses, and to remind people that the government can just give you money, and that's nice, bank account balance go up, and that this is a choice that we can make, that we don't have to contort ourselves into whatever the position that the venture capitalists want. It's a choice.
It seems to me at this moment it's really, really important to keep that what you just said in mind in terms of inflation. To the extent that our inflation numbers are any different than around the world, it's minimal. That the real issue that is impacting everybody is supply chains, is COVID. But the wage increases are real. Those are much harder to roll back because people are not going to continue to work for the same job for less pay. That's just, people mentally just aren't going to want that. At least in the short term, you could theoretically fire those people and then hire new people at lower pay. But the idea is, we want our government to do things to help lock in those pay increases, and part of that is to pursue policies that don't put a cap on employment, that don't create an artificial ceiling. And just as you were talking earlier about the sort of making these decisions or being conscious of that primary assumption that the economy is a function of our decisions, always, regardless of what the economy is doing at any point, it is a reflection of decisions we've made. I've heard this over the years many, many times. We don't want government to choose winners and losers. It always chooses winners and losers. If someone's not talking about it choosing winners and losers, it probably means they're the winner in that choice that's being made. Same thing with redistribution of wealth. The government always redistributes wealth. It's just a question of in which way is that wealth redistribution going to flow. And you have a great line where you talk about that what it means to own something in this country is who has the greatest claim to the state's monopoly of power or violent authority. And you talk about proprietarianism. What is that term?
That is a term I stole from Ursula K. Le Guin in the novel The Dispossessed. Just kind of like the sound of it. Thomas Piketty has a similar word, proprietarianism, but I like mine better, or well, Ursula K. Le Guin's. But the idea there is that, this is about, as Piketty says, the sacralization of property, treating property as a sort of sacred object that can't be, fiddled with, that has to be the sort of foundation stone of the entire social order. Obviously appealing idea for rich people who own lots of property. But yeah, I think, property is almost the most interesting part to sort of dig into the socially constructed nature of all economies, because, you think about it, at a certain point, surely, in like prehistory or before human beings even existed, there was no property at all. Like anyone was free to go wherever they wanted. And, at least, you might be eaten by a jaguar or something, but you didn't, there wasn't a sort of system of fences that would tell you that this piece of ground is mine, that piece of ground is yours, that these were invented. And, you think like everything in the world, all the objects, all of the pieces of computer equipment and stuff that we're using to talk to each other right now, all that is made out of natural stuff that, once was not the property of anybody. It had to be dug up out of the ground. It was created in the supernova billions of years ago. And so, when you look at like how property came to exist in the first place, it was not at all subtle about it being a violent taking from the rest of people. That, you just read some history going back, as far as history goes, and it's just one group of people conquering and killing the other group and taking their land, and often enslaving the population, and that, is how property came to be in this country. There was there were people living here. Some of them had sort of like quasi-territorial systems, but nothing like a modern property register, sort of collective ownership, you might say. But then we came in, we killed all those people, and we set up, on almost all of the land, a system of property. And it's just built from the foundation, the politics of raw violence, the sword and the club. What property is, and what it always has been, is you set up a system where you say, this is mine, and if you disagree, you try to take it from me, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to enjoin you in the courts, or I'm going to get the police to come and drag you violently off of my property. And so property is access to the state's violent capacity, to its police and its soldiers, that you have a property register, and you can access that. You can call 911 and you will get people to respond. You file a lawsuit and you get the state to respect your lawsuit. That's not to say that property is totally illegitimate all the time. You just have to recognize that it's a social construct. And in every case, it's at the root of dispossession, theft, violence, and genocide. And so, the idea that it could be sacred is, to me, fairly disgusting. You should use it on behalf, in my view, on behalf of the general welfare of all the people.
And I want to get to that concept of it. I just want to hang here for a moment, because this is also, this idea of a monopoly of force by the government being in direct contradiction to the notion of property rights. like, or having a problem with the monopoly of force being in contradiction to the notion of property rights. That is a real problem for when libertarians, if you dig a little, like 3 inches down, becomes problematic for them. And it's also fascinating because I've had, I think it was Walter Block, who was on, who, when I was like, if you start to just go back in terms of property rights, the idea of property rights start not necessarily with the Constitution in this country, but more when Europeans came over and started to work the land. And that's where we're going to start, where would property rights begin, and which is very convenient. Like it's, more or less like, I don't know, getting to the top of a sports game and then saying like, the rules, I'm the best right-handed batter. So from now on, we're only going to include right-handed batters in the stats. And I'm in charge of it. And that's basically it, or something to that effect. But let's talk about the other choices that we could make. Once we acknowledge that our economy is simply a series of political choices that we make, let's talk about the other vision of what an economy we could measure a good economy by, or what the goal could be.
Yeah, in the sort of second half of the book, I have a number of proposals. We probably don't have time to go through all of them right now, but
that's why people got to read the book.
Yeah. Order from your preferred literature distribution facility. I think maybe an interesting one that Americans aren't quite as well versed in. I talk about Medicare for all. That's a pretty prominent idea. But I have a reworked and updated version of my paper that I wrote for Matt Brunig called the Leisure Agenda. And so, I just like point out that Americans work more compared to the wealth of our economy than any other country in the world. So obviously a lot of poorer countries work more hours than Americans do. But if you sort of plot a chart of hours worked versus wealth, America will be the farthest from the trend line, so to speak. And concretely, if we worked as much as I think Germans are in last place, the laziest country on earth, work the least hours on average, we would have something like 11 and a half weeks of extra vacation every year. So that's a very substantial amount of vacation. And, you look at the history of this, you get into the OECD statistics, and you go back to like 1970, America was about average compared to peer countries in Europe, Sweden, Denmark, France, Germany. And what happened over the years, the last 50 years, basically, is that all of those countries decided to work less. They had, they put in a mandatory paid vacation days for all regular employees. They got paid sick leave, and they got more of it, and they got paid maternity leave, and they add in more like bank holidays. And it was essentially a choice to take the wealth that they were accumulating through the process of like economic growth and take some of that, not in the form of more money, but just in terms of more time, more free time to basically, if you go to Europe in July, all of Northern Europe empties out, and they go down to Greece and Italy, and just to have a good time, because it's like, what's the point of being rich if you can't enjoy it? And America just didn't do any of those things. And so while all their trend lines were going down since 1970s, USA is just flat. We're working about the same as we were back in 1970, even though, we're about something like twice as rich. And it's like, why? There's a culture of overwork that penetrates way, way up into the income ladder. Some of the people who work the most hours are some of the wealthiest people. Wall Street bankers or Silicon Valley tech guys, they're video game developers or software engineers and stuff. Some of these people work crazy hours, and this is a political choice. This is something that we could get rid of if we just change the way that the laws worked and made it enforced things like a 37.5-hour work week, or mandatory overtime pay for people who do more than 40 hours or 37 and a half. There's a whole menu of options I lay out in there, and I think it speaks to the just sort of the way that you need to kind of stay on top of things. You got to update your economy, not just be dealing with sort of a leisure time a beta test or whatever from back in 1970, because then you're just piling up money that you never even get to spend.
When you make that comparison with Germany, where if we worked commensurate with our I guess our wealth as a nation, if we worked what they did, we got to their sort of dynamic, I guess we would have 12 weeks of vacation, which sounds very, very enticing to me. What is that? Are you measuring? Is that productivity relative to GDP? I mean, what is
that particular comparison? That's just hours. We work like 1750 something hours on average. You take hours worked divided by the number of workers, and Germany works about 500 hours less than that. The way to measure, I think, productivity in this context would be GDP per hour worked. So you're not just like USA is much richer, but in terms of GDP per capita than most European countries, not Norway because they have a lot of oil. But then if you account for hours, basically among major economies that aren't distorted by like resource rents, like Norway, which is like cutting edge rich and then has a bunch of oil money on top of that. And so they're just insanely wealthy. USA, Germany, and France are like the cutting edge, the most productive economies. And so that, I think, is a fair representation of where we would go if we were sort of following the trend of countries with comparably productive economies. We would be working that much, like about 500 hours less per year.
And that's we should say, I'm sorry, no, but that's really about redistributing the wealth, right? I mean, it's basically like saying, we've got some cash hoarders in this country who are sitting on a tremendous amount of the wealth, and therefore, as a worker in the United States, we need to get more money to pay for just some basic stuff that in these countries they don't have to pay for, right? Like, I mean, healthcare and pre-K or daycare, or there's a whole host of different things that the government is paying for by redistributing more aggressively the wealth that they accumulate as a country.
Yeah, I would say specifically with the leisure time stuff, what you're talking about is not creating the wealth at all. So you're just working less and having less production and having just like more free time. And that, I mean, in a sense, you could say that's wealth. I mean, what's the most valuable thing? What's the thing that nobody could ever make more of ever? Time. You're going to live as long as you're going to live, and there's nothing you could do about that. In terms of like, making more minutes in the day. But yeah, no, as far as the rest of it, you're absolutely right. You look at the tax level in this country, we're something like, 20 percentage points below, the Nordic countries or France. Germany is a little bit below the sort of leaders in that respect. And yeah, their resources are collectively harnessed in a way to provide those things that in the United States people have to either pay for out of pocket or go without. And you're exactly right. Childcare, healthcare is the big one. And we could get into that if you want. We pay so much for that in taxes, and then a bunch more money on top of that in private payments. child allowance, pensions for retired folks, the panoply of basic welfare state stuff. And that, and it does, I mean, especially because the economies are so much more equal, especially in the Nordics. That means taxing not only the rich, but also, the middle class and the working class. People have to pay, they just get taxed like crazy over there. You got your VAT, you got your payroll tax on the employer side and the worker side, all kinds of stuff. But the thinking is, and the reality is, you're getting that money back. It's one point or another. I mean, unless you're some kind of business titan. There's a great tweet from the @Sweden Twitter account that I refer to every now and then, from this fella who, they give it to a random Swede every now and then, which seems kind of crazy to me, but I guess that it works for them. And there's a guy taking pictures of his birthday. Him and his wife had triplets. And it was very, it's expensive delivery. They ended up being in the hospital for like a month, and he's sitting there holding his 3 babies on his chest. And he was talking about, I realized at this point, I was getting back every krona I ever paid in taxes and then some. And that's the dream, that like that you pay what you pay what you can, in proportion to your income. And then when you need help, the government's there to catch you. And it's just like a much more safe and secure and, dare I say, free way to live.
Right. I mean, that is, in that instance, it's insurance, right? I mean, It's an insurance that that if you deal with an extraordinary, which happens to people every day, event, it's not going to destroy your life. You're going to be able to just deal with the actual event itself, not the expense. And then on a daily basis, your quality of life is just better because, I mean, one of the things that's not only better about, let's say a single payer type of healthcare situation is not just that you're not paying exorbitant fees, you're paying a little bit less, so you're paying it out in higher taxes, but it's also just a system that is meant to actually deliver the service without making you jump through hoops and, spend, like, those are the hours that you never get back. Like, how am I going to pay for my kids' dental stuff? Well, it's going to involve forms in triplicate, and I filled out that one wrong, so I got to get it back. And this, that's the quality of life is also a big bonus as well. Whether you're getting the dollars back, which inevitably will happen, but in the meantime, the process itself is much better.
Absolutely. Yeah, this maybe is the most underrated argument for universal healthcare, especially. I mean, we're all familiar with just the hell of bureaucracy you are in for if you ever need medical treatment for anything. Even if you have good insurance, you gotta have your card. You got to go to the waiting area. You got to pay your copay, your co-insurance. Later on, you might get a bill, for some probably illegal, balance procedure. They recently issued some regulations about that, by the way, but there's a lot of holes in them. But, fighting with the insurance company over the phone or fighting with the doctor over the phone, over like who's going to take the hit for this massive, thing, that whatever it was, and just the worry that creates among everybody. I remember reading an article from a couple of years ago about a woman in Boston who fell between the local, what is it, MARTA, the train system up there in Boston, fell between the platform and the train, and it like crushed her leg and like cut it down to the bone. Just horrible injury. And people like pushed the train to the side and they got her out of there. And then she's crying, saying, "Don't call an ambulance. I can't afford it." I mean, that just the people got this in the back of their head, I think, a lot of the time, even if you're not, really, even if you have good insurance, you worry because it's logical to worry that you're just going to be just rooked. You're going to be taken for all you got. Possibly if you get very sick, and to just know that it's there and you don't have to do anything to access it. Like a friend of mine was in Britain one time and got, was very sick, sort of delirious with fever, and took an ambulance ride to the hospital, and she was asking, when they're sort of like bundling her out of there into the urgent clinic or whatever it was, she was like, what do I pay for it? And they looked at her like, oh honey, we don't do that here. That just, I mean, it's disgusting. It's uncivilized, you might say. And the amount of unpaid work that we all have to do to become amateur insurance adjusters and amateur legislative specialists if you're on Obamacare, so you can know exactly which plan that you should be picking, because it's not obvious. It's an incredible hassle, and it's like I would pay another 10 points in taxes to just not have to deal with any of that stuff.
Oh my God, absolutely. I mean, when you have a piece of legislation, and one of the major aspects is the creation of a navigator, a core of navigators. Like, maybe this thing is a little bit too tricky. Like, you need people to actually literally be in charge of helping you figure out how you're going to get health insurance. It's just bizarre to me. But there's more good stuff in how are you going to pay for that. Smart answers to the dumbest questions in politics. Ryan Cooper, national correspondent at The Week, will put a link to that book at majority.fm. Thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thanks so much.
Folks, just a reminder, and I probably won't have to say this many more times after this, Majority Live or MajorityReportLive.com. You can go to either one of those. The show in Brooklyn on March, what is it,
26th. Yeah.
26th at 2 p.m. I know it's at 2 p.m.
Do you want me to write it down for you?
I know it's written down somewhere. It's already like half, maybe more than half sold. And we just announced it like 5 days ago. So get on it, folks. This is a smaller venue than the Wilbur in Boston. The Wilbur in Boston is also near peak. And we've got a ton of special guests. We haven't even announced our lineup yet for Brooklyn. But let's be honest. I mean, it's just a party. Oh, no, wait, that's in Boston. This is a party.
On majority.fm, there's only a link to the Boston Live show.
What?
Yeah, we got to add. I mean, if you go to Majority Live, it seems like you can get both, but... Wait,
what? No. Did I screw that up? No. If you go to majoritylive.com.
No, that one is right. Yeah, I just meant our website.
Well, I don't know who's doing that.
Okay.
I did the Majority Live thing. I don't know who was in charge of the other thing. They screwed that up. No, Bradley can't tell. I'm looking at him right now.
I'm on it. I'm already trying to fix it.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to call you out. I didn't even think that was your responsibility. Yeah, right.
I'll tell you what does work. Shop.majorityreportradio.com. That's our Shopify merchandise store. So if you run a business, you can supercharge your success with Shopify. It is the all-in-one commerce platform to start, run, and grow your business. Shopify gives entrepreneurs the resources once reserved for big business, so upstarts, startups, and established businesses alike can sell everywhere. Synchronize your online and in-person sales and effortlessly stay informed. Go to shopify.com/majority, all lowercase, for a free 14-day trial. Get full access to Shopify's entire suite of features. Grow your business with Shopify today. Go to shopify.com/majority right now. Do it right now. All right, we're going to head into the fun half in just a moment. Again, don't forget, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. Get your tickets to the live Majority Report show. Matt, what is happening in the Matt Lekian media universe.
Yeah, this weekend we released a patrons only think tank, but go back, folks, and check out the long conversation we had with Matt Binder about his new show, The Scam Economy, where we talked about crypto, the new hit piece NFT scam, where some company just made. Did you hear about hit piece? They scraped Spotify's API, I think it's called, for all the names of albums and songs and stuff, and then they started selling NFTs of individual songs, and artists were like, hey, I didn't say you could sell my song as an NFT. And it was one of those classic cases.
I don't understand what that means.
It is, it's a very philosophical question, because you can't listen to the song. You just own the NFT that purportedly has the album
you have
art
the receipt,
and the song name,
right?
And, yeah, exactly, on some registry. So they basically created a new registry of all song names and said you can claim the NFT of it. Very silly.
That's like saying, so it's, in other words, it's like, well, we're going to name all the stars, and I'm going to sell you the name of the star.
It's very
and
similar,
it's the most official.
I bet you there are
star naming registry that exists. But couldn't I start my own NFT, like a competing one?
Yeah.
Well, the thing
is,
I thought it was just going to be a fiasco and blow up in their face, but Binder did a little bit more digging, and the guy has a recording industry background, and it looks like what they were trying to do is basically it's easier to ask forgiveness than ask permission. And so they're just doing it, and then they were going to hopefully sell some and then go to the artist after they got the money and say, hey, you want in on this money that we got for selling an NFT of your...
But I don't even understand, what it is they're selling. If you're not getting the song, you're just getting the rights to say that you own the song?
Yes.
Yeah.
Without any of... Well, but why can't I also do that?
The NFT folks have a big problem with rights, because they also bought a rare copy of Dune, I believe the book, and thought that allowed them to make any sort of movie based on it, but that's not how that works.
Could I sell the rights to the ownership of the Majority Report with just the NFT of the Majority Report?
Yeah, I mean,
could we sell multiple ones?
We could do majority ones. We could do probably Hassan ones. We could do Pac-Man NFTs. We could sell NFTs of all.
I'd love to sell Pac-Man NFTs. Monetize his show.
So there's just copyright does not exist in this world. But
well,
yes,
it does.
It's not even copyright though. It's not. You're not really owning anything.
Yeah,
it's just the
vaporware.
idea that you supposedly own it, right?
Yeah, I mean, they'll find out copyright exists if they start making Disney NFTs. And
I still don't understand the concept of it. Well, with that said, though, I will also be on, I think, Matt Binder's show Doomed tomorrow night.
Yes. So we heard last week. Yeah, he said that.
Oh.
You were ironing out this.
It's so complicated right now with me doing anything, but it's his 200th show, so the pressure's on.
Oh yeah.
But I'm gonna have I can't even. I'm gonna have more than my own children that night.
What do you mean?
It's too complicated.
Is it a play date or something?
No, it's
All right.
Forget it.
It's just... Your example of naming a star, that does exist. You can name a star on the Ethereum blockchain.
Oh my God.
dstar.org.
I thought that was just a romantic thing sometimes people did.
Why can't I name
a star?
Forget it. We're not even going to use the blockchain.
But
I'm just going to sell star names.
If it's not on the blockchain, then it's not, does it really, it doesn't mean anything.
We will create a certification at the Majority Report. So you go around, you meet somebody who's like, oh, that's my star up there. And you just go, no, it's not. Here's the Majority Report certification that's whatever I named it.
But that's what's so good about the blockchain, because you can prove your ownership by being really wasteful with energy.
Yeah, well, you can prove your ownership when we start up our own certification by going to Majority Report, majority.fm, whatever it will be, /star certification.
Right.
And that's what we're going to do. That's the new business venture that we're in.
All right, let's head into the fun half, shall we? 646-257.
I don't even have to do that now because I'm sitting on a pile of star certification cash. So I'm feeling it today. I'm going to start throwing around the big bucks.
Yeah.
Do fun half NFT.
There you go. All right, folks. I may even just like NFT of me saying 646-257-3920. You could own the fact that I said that. See you in the fun app.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun app.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. You see white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males...
Psych. Fuck them.
Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. All lives matter.
Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keep it at 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on, fuck them. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy.
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
Bear at home, me too. Sorry, Sam. I own the NFT of the Majority Report. If you're interested in buying it, we can talk. Appreciate that. Artist. Uptown Girl. She's been living in her white bread world. Okay? That's not fraud. Tide goes in, tide goes out. How are you going to pay for that? Geez, Sam, you're hawking vitamins now? What's next? Gallon buckets of mac and cheese? I'm only kidding.
I don't get that.
I think the idea was like, these are not like neurotropic. We've had those. These are just like multivitamins.
We're not selling silver supplements or whatever.
Rand Paul's neighbor. Haven't had my IMs read in a while. Feeling pretty censored. You know what? Someone at the last IM of the day last week, and I can't remember who it was, said, why am I being shadow banned or something to that effect? And I was like, this is the first time I've ever seen that person's thing. So maybe they were being shadow banned during the, but I don't know. Digby Fridays. Hey, Sam, when are you inviting Digby next? I love your discussions with her. I bet my Majority Report subscription for 2 years that she will support your take on Ukraine, give the State Department tips on how to lie even better. Digby is coming on, I don't know, I'll probably have her on this Friday, but I get the sense that you're your assessment. Look, I don't know. You know, like there are supposedly, I don't know if it's if they refer to themselves as anti-imperialists or anti-war, but I am against the killing of people and the war. And as far as I know, no one has refuted the fact that Russia has built and amassed over 100,000 troops on the border of Ukraine. Now, I don't know what their intentions are. It seems a little weird, unless they're afraid of Ukraine invading Russia, which I also think would be a little weird to assume. But there's now reportedly 130,000 troops. Maybe there isn't. Maybe that's a complete myth. But I think that there is a legitimate concern that Russia is going to invade Ukraine. I don't need to feel that Ukraine is full of nice people to not want that to happen. If the worst thing that the State Department does is pretend that there's going to be some false flag and describe it, and that prevents a war. But, you know, I don't think people understand what the leverage situation is here. Seems to me that Russia has most of the leverage at this point. There doesn't seem to be a huge willingness to admit Ukraine into NATO, at least by the partners of NATO, or it would have happened by now. There was a commitment made by George Bush that they would come in, and it created certain expectations, and there's certainly, without a doubt, people who want to admit Ukraine into NATO. Personally, I think we should start kicking everybody out of NATO and begin to wind it down.
But doesn't the fact that the idea that Ukraine will be admitted into NATO, and like the fact that it's not going to happen, doesn't that give the United States more leverage? Or no, wait, actually, no, it's the opposite.
No, Russia wants a commitment that Ukraine will never be invited into NATO.
Yeah.
And I mean, personally, like I say, I would prefer there to be no NATO. But it's unlikely that NATO is going to say, okay, Russia, you can dictate who we allow in there, even if we don't want Ukraine, because they don't want to set that precedent. I mean, I'm hoping that there's a situation where like they come to like, okay, we guarantee no admission for X number of years, and that satisfies Russia. And I think, listen, Russia has a legitimate concern as to like, why are you offering admission into your military alliance to a country that borders on us?
Yeah,
I think that's a legitimate concern. But I just think the stupidity that, or disingenuousness, people dying at the hands of Russian missiles or gunfire is not better or worse than them dying at the hands of American. No. It's not. I'm against people dying in wars.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is if the problem I've had with America in this entire thing is it seems like there's other countries that want a little bit more caution and a little bit less of there's an imminent invasion underway talk. And so like if the false flag stuff, if there is an actual imminent invasion underway and the false flag stuff deters that, that's great. But if there's not, and I don't know what the other interpretation of Russia massing on the border is, but if there's not, and the U.S. if this is another in the genre of America being more alarmist about the situation than countries closer to the situation are.
I mean, is there a sense that that the U.S. is more alarmist about it than Ukraine or
than the European countries that are in NATO? I think so.
Lithuania?
I mean, like France and Germany, I think so.
Do you think France and Germany are not as concerned about it?
Yeah.
That's been, I think, a sticking point in the way that, the United States hasn't been happy with Germany's lack of urgency.
I've seen suggestion that Germany's not because, they're compromised by like the pipeline.
Nord Stream.
Like that. But, if they are, they are.
Well,
like,
they have incentives too, like any other country. I mean, and then there's when people take it too far when they show a complete disinterest and are seemingly only vocal about against United States imperialism as opposed to what Russia would be doing here. I mean, we're obviously against any invasion. It's just about tamping down alarmism or United States propaganda that wouldn't be directly resulting in de-escalating a potential conflict.
The fascinating thing to me, too, is that for all of the blame that supposed Russiagate gets for this, it is the Republicans who have been pushing in the Senate sanctions before preemptive sanctions.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it's unreasonable to say we're going to have sanctions that are conditioned, and what those sanctions are. I think I probably would have a disagreement as to what's in the Senate at the moment. But I don't. But in terms of just generically speaking, making sanctions conditioned upon an invasion, I think is appropriate.
Right.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing.
It's
like
the
as opposed to being
it's the Republicans who want to sanction the Russians before they invade, which seems to me to be ludicrous.
But at the same time, though, Josh Hawley is saying publicly that he doesn't think Ukraine should be admitted into NATO, and the White House is saying that he is disseminating propaganda on behalf of the Russian government. I mean, that's bullshit.
I think Josh Hawley is just trying to make a name for himself, but in the main, yes, I think it's a perfectly legitimate. I think that's.
Yeah, I mean that Hawley point is like that's like Ron Paul saying like coming out against the war and now being like, well, there's two parties that are kind of against the war. It's like not really. Hawley has the I know you know.
But it's like Rand Paul and Bernie working together on Yemen. I mean, I don't particularly care, right? I like where that goes.
I agree with what Hawley said. I just don't think Hawley's follow through is going to be there. But.
Exactly. The idea of it, I think, has merit. I don't necessarily trust the messenger, but that's irrelevant. Is this me? My dad's identical twin brother, legendary surfer, beloved family man, kind sage of the surfing world, committed leftist, passed away in his sleep on Friday. As long as he's still with us, it was like a part of my dad was still alive. A shofar would be appreciated for the man who loved freely. Sure. Sorry about that. Someone challenged my condemnation of Joe Rogan's facilitation of white supremacy by tweeting a picture of Glenn Greenwald defending him as if that proved Rogan was a lefty from way back. Let's see. Hold on, I want to take a phone call. Calling from a 405 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
It's Gregory from Oklahoma.
Gregory from Oklahoma. I was hoping that was you. I know you tried to call in a couple of days ago, and I don't think we took calls on that day.
Yeah, I'm here. I wanted to say thank you, Sam, for coming on my show a couple of weeks ago. The interview dropped last Monday, I believe.
And where can people find it?
On the Green Corn Rebellion Show YouTube channel. Type in Green Corn Rebellion Show on YouTube and it should come up.
Now, Gregory, do you think it was really a fair assessment of the interview to have written Gregory from Oklahoma destroys, in all capitals, Sam Seder?
Yes, I feel like it was very accurate to do that.
Well,
I don't like lying to people. I like telling the truth as much as I can and as brutally as possible.
And do you really think you needed to cut it up into 6 different segments, all of which are some variation of Seder destroyed here, eviscerated here, eliminated here? I mean, honestly. Well,
I had to do it to him.
I mean, how am I when I do? I got to get back to you on a time. Although you're offering me times that are quite late on weekends.
That's what he does. He tries to get you when you're sleepy.
You're throwing me off here.
Destroys you.
I mean, are you gonna? This is why I don't know if I'm going to get the same treatment. Am I going to be smeared in all caps by Gregory from Oklahoma?
Only if you say things that are smearable, like Sam did, in order to get destroyed and eviscerated.
I had my guard down.
Yeah.
Had my guard down.
Yeah. Yeah, because I've been a fan of the show, just like Jackson Hinkle.
Right.
Yeah.
We didn't know that we'd lost you by that point.
But no, that video now, the interview that I did with Sam is like my 5th most watched video on my channel now.
Wait, 5th?
So
after the Matt Leck interview, I guess probably.
What's the other top 4, Gregory?
Hold on, let me pull it up. So you can know the truth. All right. So the top one is my interview with Matt Crispin from Chapo. Then my interview with Farron Cousins, Ring of Fire. Then my interview with Tabitha Wallace. And then my interview with Frankie Palmieri of The Mirror.
I was hoping it was Matt.
All right.
I was hoping it was Matt.
I know what The Mirror is. I don't even ever heard of that. Well, all right.
The Mirror's a band, but yeah.
Okay, well, all right. Whatever.
Getting cush bombed.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, maybe we'll put a link up, Bradley, to Gregory's interview. Maybe let's see what we can do a little better. This is.
So you want to promote you videos of you getting destroyed?
There's a lot of stuff I've said on there. I've said nowhere else, I think, Gregory.
Yeah, see?
Yeah.
Got a lot of information out of him.
Yep.
Use enhanced interrogation tactics.
Yep.
I saw the video of you torturing that elf during the beginning of War on Christmas that you talked about on CNN, and I used those tactics against them.
Well.
So, yeah. But also, I had a couple other things I wanted to mention before I go.
Please.
So my birthday was this past Saturday, and I was supposed to have a campaign fundraiser, but we had to cancel because it snowed and the weather was bad.
Oof.
So we're rescheduling it for this Saturday. But
it's coming
my birthday
Saturday.
was the Saturday. Yeah. But my birthday was this past Saturday on the 5th, and I turned 24. So, yeah.
Wait, how old did you turn? Wait a sec, sorry. Pulled the trigger on that a little too early. Well, how old did you turn?
24.
24. Wow. Running for state senate.
Yeah.
Good for you.
State representative. State House.
State House.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yep. And also last week on the 1st, I think it was a Tuesday, I was a story was written about me in my school's, my college's newspaper. So that was pretty interesting.
Great.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, Gregory, things look like they're looking up for you. The only that's what you get when you destroy. You destroy, mate. It's
David versus Goliath.
It's nothing but wealth and riches to follow. So congratulations.
I know.
We'll put a link to that, despite my better judgment. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye, Gregory. There you go. Got some clips to go over here. People are very, very mad on the right with Mike Pence. I know which we start with.
I still think like Mike Pence is trying to get crucified.
Mike Pence likes,
like when
being criticized.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think he goes back into like Bible mode, be like the people will be against you sometimes.
Or he's just it's his way to atone. He's like Silas in the Da Vinci Code.
Let's go to this clip. Steve Bannon reacting to Mike Pence. This is going to be a little bit of a little battle between the Trumpites and the theocrats, and I don't know what will come of it, but it can only be good for America. Unless, of course, they both win, which happened last time. Here is Steve Bannon.
This week, that President Trump said I had the right to overturn the election. But President Trump is wrong. I had no right to overturn the election. The presidency belongs to the American people and the American people alone. And frankly, there is no idea more un-American than the notion that any one person could choose the American president.
Wow. That's not what President Trump... What President Trump said is you had the full right to revert back to the states, like Jay Corman in Pennsylvania, in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania's President Pro Tem, sent you a letter and requested that you send it back to the state legislatures so they could review the process of how they certified the Biden electors. Pence, you're gonna carry this thing eventually to your grave, okay? Because it is a mark of shame, and you are a stone-cold coward. A stone-cold coward. Boris Epstein. We're going to start with numbers.
Oh, my God. When did Bannon get so God squatty? He's got those pictures of Jesus behind him?
He has his own quote behind him. Can we pull that up just a still?
Was that his own quote?
Oh, yeah. It's by Stephen K. Bannon. I mean, honestly, like, you have your own name behind you, but it's not, it's having your own quote's a whole different level.
You mentioned Boris Epstein.
There are no conspiracies, but there are no coincidences. And then in a...
That's a useless phrase.
Well, yeah, I mean, is it supposed to be sarcastic?
If you flip it over, it says, everything is nothing.
We can do hard things, yes. Silly. Boris Epstein, who he mentioned, I always like to look up how Boris is doing. He used to be at that Sinclair
right?
thing. He's currently posted on YouTube. He posted a video 12 days ago, so he's still with his YouTube channel. 86 videos and total subscribers 67. I don't know how a guy that does as much media as Boris does just gets absolutely zero play, but it's funny.
One of the few Trumpers I've met in my life. I met him.
You met him?
Yeah. I met him at the debate. Is media creature, very much so. Wanted to be at the center of all of the what do you call that like the pit where there's a bunch of he was very available.
Yeah, somebody said they went to college with him and he was very popular, which was disappointing to hear.
Bannon is basically saying that on some level, like, Pence is like the devil, right? I mean, he's gotten like a mark. What's going on? Stone cold coward.
I mean, but that is how the Trumpers are going to respond to that. He has no. This is the only way. This is the only path that Pence can go down, and he did so very unwillingly because I think even he understands. Well, this is it for him with that base.
He's getting in the way of their, future election stealing plans because that's how they're going to do it again.
Right. So he's already on the record as saying that was illegitimate, but they're going to come up with a different way. What's fascinating is you see Steve Bannon say that Mike Pence is a coward to do this. Mike Pence, of course, he's not taking any type of principled position here. If he had, it wouldn't have taken him a year to realize, like, Donald Trump seems to be saying I have the ability to change the election outcome. It took me a year. I hadn't heard about that before. 13 months later. No, he's done some polling that shows that he has no chance of getting those people back. What's also interesting is to look at and see how non-Steve Bannon and non-Mike Pence, who's out there for himself, how they're reacting to it. Here is John Barrasso, Republican from Wyoming. Remember, the Congress person from Wyoming, Cheney, Liz or Lynn, I don't care. She has basically been excommunicated from the Republican Party.
I mean, the RNC just censured her and Kinzinger at that conference that they did, where they also said that January 6th was legitimate discourse.
I would be in favor of both Kinzinger and Cheney and the RNC all putting themselves into a rocket and shooting out as far as like the rocket will go forever. But here is Barrasso, John Barrasso, Republican senator from Wyoming, with Fox's Martha McCallum to see how he's going to react to this.
Ariel, I want to switch gears with you for a moment, Senator, if I might. This is a clip of the former Vice President Mike Pence at a speech that he gave at the Federalist Society on Friday with regard to January 6th and his role. Here it is.
Okay, we heard that already.
People alone.
Do you agree with Mike Pence on that, sir?
You know, I voted to certify the election, and I think Mike Pence did his constitutional duty that day. It's not the Congress that elects a president, it's the American people. But I tell you, President Trump and Mike Pence did remarkable things for this country. And I hope they can work out their differences. We are better as a party when we're unified, and we are united, certainly here in Wyoming, about what this current administration is doing with regard to high prices, inflation, an open border, crime in the cities. People of Wyoming are fed up, as they are all across the country, with what's happening today. And my focus is on the future, taking back the House, taking back the Senate, the 2022 elections, not the 2020 elections.
So you agree, but do you agree with Mike Pence, because you did vote to certify, that he did not have the power to overturn the election?
I voted to certify the elections. I will tell you, I've been at 15 events in Wyoming in the last week. Last night, 800 people at a Boys and Girls Club dinner. This never comes up. People are really concerned about empty shelves at the grocery store, high prices, $1 a gallon higher price for gasoline, an open southern border with criminals, all of these people coming across, crime in the cities. People in Wyoming want me to focus on the future, not the past. That is where I am focusing all of my attention.
That is where their priorities are.
I mean, I love that. This is absolutely not on anyone's mind. It is completely, no one cares about this, which is why I am terrified to give you an answer to your question. I am so sorry. I cannot answer that.
If there's one thing Wyoming residents care more about, it's crime in the cities.
Yes,
oh my God.
That densely populated urban area of Wyoming.
What's the biggest city that they have there?
It's got to be Cheyenne, I think. But they have less people.
And what is their Cheyenne downtown like?
I think it's bigger. I'm trying to look that up because I know that Wyoming has less people than North Dakota, which is insane.
Population of Cheyenne, Wyoming is 63,000 people.
So is Wyoming the second least populous state after Montana?
Oh no, Montana's got way more.
Okay, Montana's got more, or Wyoming's
what kind of crime do you have in
Wyoming's least?
What kind of crime in the cities do you have in Wyoming? Is that like where someone took someone's snowboard, or what's going on there?
I think it's like war crimes by the Cheney family.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Ranchers just destroying public lands.
Yeah, Wyoming is the least populated state in the country.
What's fascinating is how terrified he is to even weigh in on that, in any context. Mm-hmm. And this is, I don't think this is going to be. It really is, in many respects, based upon when you look at what Joe Biden has been able to accomplish and his alacrity, as it were. This may be the only thing that ends up being that mitigates, possible outcome in 2024, is that people are going to be forced to take a side on a question they don't want to. Mm-hmm. And I imagine this is going to come up more and more. This is not going to go away. This seems like the beginning of Pence's campaign on this, not the end of it.
Yeah, Democrats would be thrilled if the 2024 election is about January 6th. They'd be thrilled.
Yes.
Because they've got there's the entire domestic agenda is likely dead. So that it's a gift to them.
I also wonder, in terms of timing, why Pence is doing this now. It just seems odd timing to me. I mean, and there is a reason he's doing it now. I don't know what it is, but there is a reason.
Is this like some big Federalist Society meeting, annual situation?
That's just a situation. That's just a venue.
Yeah.
He clearly was aware that Donald Trump felt this way over the past 13 months. It's not just coming to his attention now. It is, and it could be about his career. It could be about other things. But there is a reason. I have no idea what it is. Fascinating. Here is Marco Rubio also responding. They were all asked this weekend. Marco Rubio facing what could be
profiling courage,
a somewhat contentious re-election campaign in Florida going against Val Demings. I haven't seen any polling. I haven't heard anything about it. But this will give you an indication of who Marco Rubio thinks is going to vote for him.
Miami. Senator, we invited you to come on this show to talk about China. I want to get there, but I have to start here. Do you agree with Mike Pence?
Well, if President Trump runs for re-election, I believe he would defeat Joe Biden, and I don't want Kamala Harris to have the power as vice president to overturn that election. And that's the same thing that I concluded back in January of 2021.
So Donald Trump was wrong?
Well, as I said, I just don't think a vice president has that power, because if the vice president has that power, Donald Trump would defeat Joe Biden in 4 years or 2 years, and then Kamala Harris can decide not to overturn the election. I don't want to wind up there.
Right. So,
I mean, Matt and I were thinking the same thing. Clearly, like they got the same memo. Him and Mike Pence. Make it about Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
She's the vice president now, and she's unlikable and scary because of the whole black thing and the woman thing.
Yeah.
And so let's make it about she would have the ability to overturn the election. And obviously Biden is a puppet of someone like Kamala Harris because everyone's heard him speak, right? He's not all there. So that's what they're going with. And I think you're right that it's no coincidence that they're all coming out with the same thought and making it about Kamala Harris.
I think maybe on some level it's somebody was like, we need to put this to bed. Yeah. And he thinks that this is going to be put to bed because Pence did it. I'm not sure. I really don't get it. But they, Rubio at least had, as opposed to Barrasso, a, sort of ready-made response.
Yeah. He's in bed with little Marco, in bed with...
little tiny Marco.
Oh, gosh. If we steal the election...
Mikey.
That means a black woman might be able to steal election in the future? Oh, we can't do that then.
I mean, maybe that ends up being, I don't know. Maybe that's Trump's step down too.
Well, they can tie it in with the illegal voting too, right? Like, I mean, their main concern there is black and non-white people voting. So the stealing of the election, it's a twofer if there's a black woman who's doing it as well.
All this stuff is really tough to read because you headlined the voting, mail-in voting thing, and I don't is that really that's going to hurt their voters as much as Democrats, isn't it? Or is there more on that now?
Well, it's tough to know. Because Democrats use the mail-in voting in sort of unprecedented numbers because of COVID. In the past, Republicans have used it more, but I think they're just looking, and maybe they're wrong, but nobody really knows. And they're focusing on swing state votes. And I think there is some logic to the idea, if I'm the Republicans, that the Democrats seem to have a system to do this, and it was effective last time, so let's eliminate that because their system is effective and we can come up with something else. I don't know, but that seems to be the sort of the logic of that, anyways. Let's go to what else should we get here?
We should talk about Joe Rogan, probably.
Okay. Do you want to play? You don't want to play the whole video.
I don't know. I mean, I just figured it's something we should weigh in on.
Joe Rogan. I mean, I think everybody's aware of this at this point. Joe Rogan. There was a compilation, and I feel like this compilation has been around for a while.
Yeah.
Of him saying the N-word. That was released, and he took to Instagram to push back on it. Now, there's a couple of things that I should say here. One is, I am sympathetic with the idea that this guy had said it, and I don't know for a fact because I don't know the context of all these things, but the idea that he said this in context and that he's apologizing for it now.
Well,
I mean,
this was a policy. Like, for example, people were countering with TYT used to say it in order to not sanitize the racism. Now we understand that that's not the right thing to do, but that was back then. That was the policy.
I said it on radio, and I'm sure there's other occasions, maybe on this iteration of the show too, at one point in a similar fashion. In fact, I think I've probably said it publicly on air more times than I've probably said it off air in my lifetime, to be honest with you. I don't know that I've ever used it in that context, but I am sympathetic with the idea that someone says, I'm sorry about this. And they made an effort to take it down prior to that. His other story, I'm not as quite sympathetic about it. At least I guess he took it down at one point. That was the part that really sort of struck me.
Mm-hmm. The one that he apologizes for.
Yeah, and look, he's apologizing for it. I still contend. Well, let's play this clip.
The apology is bizarre because he says something just as offensive in the apology.
Yeah, that's so weird. We're going to play that clip, right, Bradley?
Yeah, where do you want to start? From the beginning or from the second anecdote?
Get to the second anecdote.
It's part of also me doing this podcast for thousands of hours, thousands of episodes, over 12 years. I said a lot of fucking stupid shit, which is fine when you're talking about most things, but not when you're talking about race. And there's another clip that I have to address. There's a clip from 11 years ago. I was telling a story on the podcast about how me and my friend Tommy and his girlfriend, we got really high. We were in Philadelphia, and we went to go see Planet of the Apes. And we didn't know where we were going. We just got dropped off by a cab, and we got dropped off in this all-black neighborhood. And I was trying to make the story entertaining, and I said, we got out, and it was like we were in Africa. It's like we were in Planet of the Apes. I did not, nor would I ever say that black people are apes, but it sure fucking sounded like that. And I immediately afterwards said, that's a racist thing to say. Planet of the Apes wasn't even in Africa. I was just saying there's a lot of black people there. Then I went on to talk about what a positive experience it was and how much fun it was to go to see this movie in a black neighborhood. It wasn't a racist story, but it sounded terrible. And like I said, you can have clunky stories about anything, but not about race. And so I deleted that whole podcast, but obviously somebody made a clip out of it and taken out of context. It looks terrible, but it looks terrible even in context. It's a fucking idiotic thing to say. And I was just trying to be entertaining. I certainly wasn't trying to be racist. And I certainly would never want to offend someone for entertainment with something as stupid as racism. My hope is that, look, I can't go back in time and change what I've said. I wish I.
Okay. And,
but the idea, it's like, nah, I wasn't calling black people apes. I was just saying in Philly, it's like we're in Africa. It's like, has Joe, we were talking about this before the show, has Joe Rogan ever gone to a really white space and been like, it feels like I'm in Denmark?
Right. This is, I went into, it's like Finland around here, all these white people. I mean, look, the guy, the bottom line is, I mean, he did delete the thing, and 11 years ago. I don't quite buy I don't think it's a defense. Done the show for 12 years, thousands of hours of the show. We've done this show for 12 years. And we do 2.5 hours a day. I mean, I can't do the math, but that's a lot. But I think like the bottom line with this is I revert to what I had said on Hayes that night. And on some level, it is also like this tweet that somebody put out. I don't know who this guy is at all, frankly. But it really does capture it. And on some level, Michael Brooks and I would talk about Rogan in the same way. That this is a guy in over his head who may have certain Massachusetts idiotic proclivities that made him attracted to and attractive to right wingers who surrounded him and fed him stuff, and he was just too idiotic to know how to respond to it. I mean, there's like...
But like the proclivities are racist, though.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think so. And there's an episode he was on with Ben Shapiro at one point. I'm not sure what the context was off the top of my head, but we're talking about, race science, and they're talking about, genetic traits. And I don't even know that he knows that that's race science.
Well, he's had multiple race scientists on his show. And yes, he's pushed back in some ways on what some people have said. But genetic determinism is a theme on Joe Rogan's show. Yeah. And that's not by accident.
Well, I don't even know he's aware of it. This is not a defense of him. This is just like I'm doing my analysis. I mean, if I'm Spotify, I don't want to be associated with this unless, of course, I'm Spotify and I'm making millions upon millions of dollars, which I am. I am not Spotify. I'm saying in that instance. Right. But this is a good explanation. I think this is a very accurate. This guy is Danielle Bolelli. I don't know if it's a woman or a man. I think it's a guy. I'm not going to read the whole tweet thread, but I'll read this part. Joe's formula when he first started was to smoke weed and shoot the shit with friends, and it worked. Then he kept the same approach when he extended the circle to people like me. Casual shoot the shit kind of conversations about mostly mildly controversial topics. I think this guy must have a podcast or something. And it still worked. Then he started going for celebrities, and it still worked. The problem began when he started having highly controversial guests with ultra-sensitive topics. Why was this a problem? Because Joe never really changed his style. He always remained friendly host who doesn't really challenge his guests with hard questions, who essentially agrees with whoever's in front of him and doesn't push back. It's perfectly fine with friends, non-controversial guests, or celebrities. But it doesn't really work if you choose to dive headfirst into the middle of the culture wars and invite on the show some really disturbed and disturbing individuals. If he wants to deal with those topics, he should either ask harder questions or, better yet, get someone with a different viewpoint and let them hash things out between them while he plays neutral moderator. He didn't do that, and the results are what they are. I would add here, or what you could do is read. Read for 2 hours before you invite some idiot on. Don't just like collect some tweets and say, well, of course, the more pushback he got from one side of the political spectrum, the more he got cozy with the other side that was defending him, and the whole thing turned into a really vicious cycle. On the other hand, I 100% disagree with the criticisms I'm seeing these days. I saw a petition asking Spotify to fire white supremacist Joe Rogan. That's stupid. I don't think that Joe Rogan is a white supremacist in the way that a lot of these right-wingers and a lot of the people he surrounds himself with on the show is. But he is platforming them. And he is doing so because it has made him extraordinarily wealthy. He was already fairly wealthy. Now he's extraordinarily tens of millions wealthy. And maybe he's doing it out of ego or just pure idiocy or whatever it is. But the dude's over his head, and someone someone has responsibility. He's a grown adult. He should take it. But the corporate stakeholders in Spotify also have a responsibility.
Did you say corporate?
Yeah, corporate. And
well, that's interesting to me because I've been hearing on the Twitter sphere that Joe Rogan is not a part of corporate media.
Listen,
I'm just teeing you up.
No. Well, exactly. This show for 12 months was replayed on Peacock, which is the streaming app owned by NBC, on a channel that was like the MSNBC. It was called The Choice. Not my decision.
It was not your choice.
No. The Choice by MSNBC was
Not
what
The
they
Choice by
rebranded
Sam
it at one
Seder.
point.
Nope. Keep going. Sorry.
This show was on there. They had absolutely no say in who we booked, in our editorial. We had on there, I mean, a whole host of different people, including Andreas Malm, who wrote a book advocating for property destruction as part of climate change, which I know has gotten some controversy recently in the New Yorker. Nobody noticed that we had it because that's that. We had literally on multiple occasions the head of the union that is unionizing MSNBC, The Choice. No, I never heard a word about it. I don't even know if they ever watched the show. The only thing that they had a say in was I let them do all the marketing that they wanted for the show, which was not that much. Then the pictures, and that was it. Nothing else.
They added some nice graphics too, right?
And pre-existing show, and I can assure you, the money was not anywhere near what Joe Rogan got. It was not an exclusive deal. Majority Report was still available on YouTube and still available on whatever, on iTunes and wherever we do it. The relationship far less close. And there was many people who perceive it as a corporate relationship. Fine. Absolutely. That's absolutely fine.
Yeah, we like to be on notice like that.
Right. That's absolutely fine.
And the relationship is now
I
over,
was
but-
excited to be able to do that stuff on that platform. And I just felt like, I'm not sure that it's really making a difference there. But whatever. The point being, to think that Joe Rogan is not corporate media is absurd. Now, it may be the case that they do not have editorial control over him, although my understanding is that when he signed on, there was about 30 or 40 episodes that Spotify did not take. Fine. I guess you could say that's not control.
I would also guess that some of the apologies that he's issuing are being strongly encouraged by certain corporate executives.
Listen,
at Spotify.
it may be a total coincidence that he came out and apologized after Spotify's market capitalization dropped by $1 billion or something plus. That may be a total coincidence.
Market capitalization. It's like they have shareholders.
He may have felt like he needed to put out an apology just based upon his own desires, whatever. But I don't know why we are hearing from Spotify at this point at all. I mean, everybody agrees that Spotify is a massive corporation, right? Why are we hearing from them? Why are they talking about we stand behind Joe Rogan? Why? It's an exclusive deal. Now, for those people who are worried that we're trying to cancel Joe Rogan could leave Spotify tomorrow, put his stuff up on YouTube, and buy this show, the revenue of the show, 100 times over. I have no doubt about it. It is simply like the people defending him as not being corporate. The people defending him, like, put up Greenwald's tweet.
Well, it's such an aesthetic. I mean, imagine like making this argument and claiming that it's anything except for like just the way that he speaks on his podcast. That's how shallow this thinking is.
Totally. Here it is. Rogan is corporate media only in the most technical and least meaningful sense of the term.
Why
yes,
is it least
paid.
meaningful?
He's
Technical meaning it's exactly what it is.
He's paid by a large corporation so they can carry his content exclusively, but he's not answerable to corporate bosses about who he can interview and what he can say, except for the idea that Spotify does not have some type of clause. Moral clause is absolutely absurd. There is no corporation in the world.
It's not even an identical situation to, I'm sorry, I'm reading that tweet off of some that person respect. It's not even identical to what was happening with Peacock. Yeah.
That's good. Right. But be that as it may, the point being, $100 million. $100 million. And I think to a certain extent, the fact that he's going to have total misinformation on his show because he doesn't do any homework is maybe an indication that he's not actually, getting any editorial control from Spotify. So this is on Spotify. They are publishers of his material, definitionally. They have the exclusive right to publish his material. The exclusive right. He's only on YouTube if Spotify says okay. He's only on iTunes if Spotify says okay. And in some instances, they say no. Some instances, they say limited way for marketing purposes. And so this is on Spotify. They're making millions of dollars on this. And if they think it's okay to have a host on there who is talking about a pandemic and doing no homework whatsoever, that's on Spotify. It really is.
I mean,
and if Spotify made a deal with someone who they had to exclude 30 of his episodes, they were on notice. They knew what they were buying. They knew what they were buying.
And protecting Spotify's asset is not, in my opinion, should be the first priority of free speech. The thing about the Joe Rogan stuff, so there's the him saying the N-word, whether either conceptually because he's sort of fascinated by it or in quotations, or even like the blatantly racist jokes, like those are a problem, and I think you should have to answer for him. The bigger problem is like this is a guy who has regular guests on who are just confirmed reactionaries. Like, I mean, Stefan Molyneux, Gavin McInnes, but like Douglas Murray is a guy who was like the Muslim hordes are coming to the death of Europe, I think is language he's using. So it's like, this is a guy, Joe Rogan, this guy who gets attention from folks who are like searching for something, like curious about drugs and all this stuff. And then all of a sudden here's 3 hours about how Muslims are like incompatible with democracy. It's despicable. And so like the idea that he like dissects corporate talking points, please. Like when we were talking about
that's the amazing thing.
Bullshit.
No, because it's aesthetic. It's just an aesthetic
exactly,
point.
But the point is it's an aesthetic to cover up business class propaganda concerns. So like what was going on when we were talking about childcare or parental leave for parents? Joe Rogan was giving basically a light version of the GOP thing, saying that's for women. Why are men staying home, right? Like he's a pro-boss propagandist. That's the idea that he's against any sort of corporate thing is only because he's not, Tucker Carlson.
Well, yeah, this is there's two issues here, right? In my mind, one is that Spotify, the corporation, and who are they owned by? Is it Syria? Like, what is there? I don't even know.
No, I think they're publicly traded.
This publicly traded company dealing with, billions of dollars of market capitalization should be responsible for the stuff that they are paying for exclusivity to publish. They are a publisher in this instance. Period. It's different. It's a different relationship than they have with music that isn't exclusive to them. When you pay for the exclusivity, You own the right to publish it. Spotify, if they wanted, is the only entity that exists that could turn it off, could determine where it ends up. They're the publisher.
That's like when Simon & Schuster canceled or Josh Hawley's book, right?
That's
that
what
would be
a
the same
publisher
thing.
is.
Yes.
That's issue one. And that has, in many respects, not so much to do with Joe Rogan. That's on Spotify. They own that. The Joe Rogan thing is not about whether, like, he has a right to say what he says. We have a right to point out the fact that the guy platforms reactionaries, racism, that he platforms all sorts of despicable garbage and spews it out. Part of that is his ignorance. Part of that is just his political disposition. But the same way I have the right to do that as with Crowder. That's not censorship. Joe Rogan is going to have a bigger bullhorn to put out his toxic garbage than any of us here will ever have. I'm not censored because of that. He could go on YouTube and continue to spout this stuff just like Alex Jones, or he could go on his own channel like Alex Jones does.
Yeah,
and they're not censored. There's just people who say, like, it's not in our business interest to promote this guy. We had David Cross on the other day, who's doing his special on his own website.
I mean, that's what Louis C.K. did.
Because Netflix said, like, well, we can't put it on until 2023. He was, I'm being censored. He's not being censored. It's absurd. And anybody pretending that Joe Rogan is some voice of anti-authoritarianism or some voice of anti-corporate or some voice of left-wing politics is insane or lying to you.
Well, there was a list.
He is a reactionary.
Yes.
He has a reactionary mind. I don't think he thinks about it that much. I don't think he spends his time like Ben Shapiro trying to develop reactionary and right-wing Republican talking points. I think he's just a product of that. Yeah.
But reactionary politics also is aided and abetted by someone like Rogan claiming that it is an apolitical project, too.
Exactly.
And that's the hallmark of those kinds of right-wing reactionaries. And so what he's doing is really, in my opinion, not fundamentally different from that.
And he gets played all the time. I mean, this is just a quote from the last time I think he had Douglas Murray on September 18th, 2020. Here's Joe Rogan's tweet. I fucked up on the podcast with Douglas Murray and said that people got arrested lighting fires in Portland. That turns out not to be true. I was very irresponsible not looking into it before I repeated it.
How many times?
I read one story about a guy getting arrested for lighting fires trying to be true, but the other shit I read about people getting arrested for lighting fires was not true. I repeated it without looking into it again, and it was a really fucking stupid mistake that won't happen again. I'm sorry. Well,
was there an asterisk next to it won't happen again?
No, and that's the funny thing. He gets played by these guys all the time. Andy knows the first reply that comes up to that, trying to say, like, actually, you were right, Joe, but, I mean, Joe is... He's this is why he keeps getting into this, is because his like sort of gurus are all these right-wing reactionaries.
Yeah.
But like the idea that he keeps getting played, to me now, I'm getting a little like tired of that shtick, because I think he has a sense for what he perceives as transgressive or something that might be spicy for his audience, and then that always trends towards right-wing racism or COVID misinformation. And so it's just the same thing by another name.
I got to go back and check, but I seem to remember when he went on to Spotify, which again is a closed garden. You don't have to pay to listen to it, I don't think, but you do need to get Spotify.
Yeah.
And you're not on all the platforms. And there was a report out that, said like his search terms had dropped dramatically. Him being searched for on Google had dropped dramatically after that. It was sometime around then that his first COVID stuff came up. Yeah. I don't know if he has the savvy or awareness to say, like, how am I going to get back into the conversation? I think maybe sometimes people just sort of gravitate to that naturally. But whatever. I mean, that's the situation. There's, until the next controversy comes up, because Spotify has made it quite clear that they're just too heavily invested in him. but that's the idea that you can't push back on that. Anybody who's telling you that is full of shit, and they're just carrying water for corporation.
Yeah, I don't think it's a coincidence that a lot of the people trying to make censorship of our time an issue about editorial conversations are the same people that are basically silent about the CRT stuff.
Or the same people that balked at editorial control potentially, or editorial changes at their previous venture, and then left to be independent so that they would not have any editorial control.
Calling from a 954 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, buddy. Michael from Miami. How are you?
Michael from Miami. Long time no hear from.
Congratulations on all your success. Tough to get through, you guys, but always enjoy it. I really do. You know, it's funny. We've been, 10 years listening to you, patron for that long.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
There are, no, thank you for the entertainment. You know, it's funny. I don't get, because of my day-to-day life, we don't get the kind of viewpoint you guys usually bring out on a regular basis. And while I don't agree with everything, you know, that's what friends do, I do appreciate the platform. And it's galling that a mouth breather like Joe Rogan, you know, a WWF guy who basically showed up, or sorry,
MMA.
WWE is
UFC guy. My bad. Sorry.
Well,
you know, it gets this kind of pub for being essentially accidentally stupid. I mean, I know that's where the battle's being fought now. Mainstream media has lost its ability to influence people, and the fights now are in the Steven Crowder and Joe Rogan areas to try to get some of those people, I think, to try to, you know, change their philosophies. But, I mean, congratulations on being able to identify those arenas before most people do.
Well, I mean, I think that's there are people who get sort of like, why are you talking about this? And I think that's.
Well, I'm like that, but I understand.
Yeah.
It took me a while to figure it out, but yeah, you're right.
I mean, that's basically it. It's because this is, you know, he's got 11 million viewers, and the people who are watching CNN, the people who are watching MSNBC, the people who are watching Fox, for the most part, are settled.
Right, they're locked in.
And
let me ask you, especially Emma and Matt. By the way, very, very cool that you guys are totally sports heads. I love it, by the way. We've talked about this before. But here's the thing. Is your generation, I know you guys are exceptional because you guys are smarter than the average, you know, 25-year-old because you're more aware of it and you want to be. But do you think people can be influenced in your generation based on what Sam's trying to do in the influencing of these alternative media platforms? Is that really going to work?
I hope so. I mean, I think we've gotten calls that say that is the case. But I mean, I know somebody who's like been radicalized by Rogan on COVID stuff for sure. So I think the inverse is definitely possible. Just depends on where you're looking.
I hope you're right, because I mean, the other thing is, you know, influencing is one thing, but Sammy and I are older, you know, especially me. It's about elections, and this is what makes it so infuriating, is that the ability of the left to define themselves is always taken over by, as Sam correctly identified, those ridiculously greedy, idiotic consultants. I mean, I don't have to tell you what's going on down here. We're in the belly of the beast. You know what's going on. I mean, it's just... DeSantis is going to win by 5 to 7 points over whoever he runs against. Rubio's up by 9 to 11 over Val Demings, who's got a nice resume, but I've told you that before, that she's just not going to win statewide, especially on the, you know, not on the on the platform she's running on. It's just not going to happen. I hope I'm wrong, but you know, the Mike Pence thing, you mentioned that earlier. Why did he decide to make this decision now? Well, one man's opinion. I think he read the tea leaves. He's not going to get the Trump voters. He sees where DeSantis is positioning himself as the alternative. He wants to be the alternative, and the only way he can do that is to try to blunt some of the force that DeSantis is getting on his own with the publicity he's getting. I don't think it's going to work.
No, I don't think so
that's
either.
Part of his thinking.
I think you're right. I think it's got to be some iteration of that anyways. But
I mean, look, you know what the consultants are like. They're horrible, right? We agree. They're terrible. They're locked in their ridiculously tiny world, and they don't know shit from Shiloh about what goes on in these states, and they try to, you know, figure out a one size fits all. Val Demings could work. She could win. You know how she'd win, Sammy? She could go there and say, I don't want you to work for $10 an hour. He does. I want you to have universal health care. I want you to have an opportunity to go to college. He doesn't want you to. But they don't do that.
Right.
They sit there with this idiotic nonsense about arguing on crime and arguing about the border, and they get dragged into their spheres of influence. And it's just maddening. I don't even pay attention to half of what she says. Nikki Fried's the same way when she's running against DeSantis if she's going to get the nomination, which she probably isn't.
I mean, I agree with you. It is completely like, to use a basketball analogy, it's like you're trying to run and you're a post-up team. I don't know if that still exists in modern basketball, but that's basically it, or vice versa. Appreciate the call, Michael.
All right, folks, take care. Good luck.
Is anybody a post-up team anymore, or no?
Cavaliers got a lot of tall guys, but they're not really a post-up team.
Is everybody just run now?
It's all run, yeah. You barely even have centers anymore.
Jesus.
I mean, I do. To your point, yeah.
But you get my point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're playing somebody else's game.
It's like the Warriors, feeding the post.
Right.
I just like so much of this is just unbelievable. I don't know. Which one? I was just looking at that. The common sense cowboy. Is that what you're talking about, Matt?
Yeah.
All right. This is insane. And you see this, like, the first time I saw this, like, robotic dog was at, like, I feel like the New York City police.
Mm.
And they were showing around, and they were people like, what the, get rid of that.
Was that before or after, like, or we were talking, de Blasio got elected, and there was a conversation about limiting the way that NYPD was just policing our neighborhoods?
Oh, this is well after. This is recent.
Yeah.
This
And
is how we're going to change the way we police. It's going to be a robot chokehold.
Right. And then, then nobody's responsible. Like, what are you going to do? Like, the technician, we're going to try the technician. We're going to charge the technician with brutality.
Here's a small payout.
And this is, this is one of those things where you see, like, capitalism and the sort of relentless desire to make money. You give all these police departments and these agencies extra funding, and then some dude's like, there's all this cash out there. What can I do to make it? I know. I'll make a robot dog. And the robot dog will, we can attach a gun to it. And then, cops got in trouble because what you need to do is you need to find the one group of people who have the least amount of political power and are as far away from any of that political power as possible. Oh, I know. Let's sell it to the Customs Bureau and ICE. They'll use it. And who's going to complain? Here is Eric Bowling with the common sense cowboy, Patrick Doranson, talking about a proposal
Isn't that redundant? I mean, not to get too into it, but I feel like most cowboys are common sense.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Esoteric cowboys.
I just am riding along.
He's just trying to contrast himself with the naked cowboy in Times Square.
Here are some common sense ideas about what we need to do at the border.
Go ahead. You know how many pit bulls are sitting in shelters right now? You could employ them right away. So, to me, this is an idea that came from DDI, and which is the largest agency in the federal government. You know what DDI is?
I don't.
The Department of Dumbass Ideas. It is something that works 24/7 in this country to bring forth stupid ideas so they can deflect, as you said earlier, from what the real problem is. Look, we need more troops on the border. We need more Border Patrol agents on the border. We need higher walls on the border. We need some more razor wire. Maybe we even need a moat. I don't know. But all this ridiculous talk that we're going to have, these mechanical dogs. I saw the picture of this thing. It's not going to scare anybody.
Now, here's the fun part about this is like, we're just going to argue on which draconian thing we're going to deploy. Common sense says you put a moat and razor wire there.
Maybe some crocodillas.
A moat. How are you going to keep that full of water?
This dude... This dude is going to be back in 6 months like, okay, it is this whole idea of having robotic elephants on the border is insane. The dogs are doing a fine job. The robotic dogs are, he wants to like release pit bulls from shelters onto the border. I mean, it's just...
That's why you can't work with these people. Like that's the depressing future is the Republicans saying, no, let's get back to like moats and like.
Damn, didn't you see those guys on the horses? What we need to do is give them whips.
Yeah, and then the Democrats being like, well, we got these
robotic dogs
with machine guns.
We're with Boston Dynamics. We have drones and just an army of dogs that'll come trample you down. If
Sharks with laser beams on their heads.
So glad that they've reinstituted Title 42. That's a positive. The dogs, why are we doing that when we just need razor wire and armored steel and moats with burning oil to pour into the moats?
He's just anti-modernity. He wants the dogs to be old school. You're not gonna get intimidated by the robots.
Completely insane. All of it's sheer insanity.
He's a cowboy libertarian. So.
There you go.
He's throwback in his violence.
Till I get actual funding from the company doing the robots, I'm going to say it's a bad idea.
Oh my god, dude has 258 followers. Why is he on TV?
He's a character. How much do you want to bet? Like, he just, like, as soon as that hits over, he goes like, well, take off that dumbass bolo tie and put my hat on and I'm going to go back out. And he's going to end up being like his company sells the robotic elephants. It's really what it comes down to. Token Funger. Do you think because Pence was picked to help Trump with evangelicals to replace him if Trump runs, they would go with Mike Pello? You heard it today, folks. Sam Seder needs the D for his prostate. They definitely
Jesus
picked
Christ.
Pence. I think that's what it is. Vitamin D is...
No, but all right.
What?
Nothing.
The need the D has a connotation.
Oh. Oh, sorry.
I mean, when you were reading the ad, I would be lying if I said I didn't think it, but.
All right. It's vitamin. Right. Okay. I guess maybe. All right. Anyways, yes, Pence was picked for that, for the evangelicals. Union Jack, any update on Christian Smalls as an interview guest? What? What's that?
The Amazon guy.
Oh, yes.
No. Do we have an update on it?
No, I just meant, like, I was reminded.
Yeah, I mean, guys, have a little patience. Country mustache. I heard this week something that has been repeated by Trump ad nauseum over a year. Yes, we're talking about Pence. Fierce deity. One person, that's ridiculous. We live big decisions to this country do exactly 538 people like a stable country. Serious business. Mother Pence 2024. Majority Report wardrobe coordinator. Here at the Federalist Society, we don't believe one man should pick the president. It has to be 5 men in funny robes. Ray, is there a voice assistant program that will, on Sam's voice command, pause it for 1 second? Pause the video. Mike Man Pike Hence. Chuds ain't listening to moralizing rhetoric about process or tradition any more than they need to maintain their fascist myth of a divine right to govern. Folks who choose violence so easily with so little evidence are unlikely to choose democracy as a method of change. Lufa Ringo. Okay, yes, I get it. More of the D. Frostbitten fascist Crowder. Wait, never mind. Old poll. Cultural currency. Mike Pence has been devalued. Time to bring in Kurt Schilling. Michael Tracy's delightful girlfriend. Ottawa update. Nazis tried to burn down a building and tape the doors shut to trap everyone inside Saturday night, 2 blocks from where I live. Ottawa declared a state of emergency. Police are finally doing some half-hearted enforcement. Ottawa mayor is calling for mediation between lunatic protesters and Trudeau, which is insane. That's nuts. Rod Stiffington. Sam, sounds like you're over. Okay. All right. MSNBC Seder got the AM quickie during the PM today. What gives?
We had a scheduling error, but we fixed it.
Okay. Left-handed stranger, a little off topic, but more important to me, what's the deal with leftist circles calling other leftist circles PSYOPs, CIA, FBI operatives and stuff? Backstory. Matt got me onto watching True Anon, and I commented on their Patreon. I know they're not going to see it, but anyway, comment anyways, that I wish they'd go on y'all's show. Someone replied to me, Sam Seder is a CIA op. If True Anon ever goes on the Majority Report, I'll know True Anon is fake.
I mean, Liz Forensic has been on the show before, I think. There's a lot of distrust. Yeah. I don't know.
I mean, this is a real long con. First, what they did is they 25, 30 years ago, they got me to drop out of law school when I was recruited by Langley. And
Langley, what was that? What school was that again?
I was at BU Law.
Yeah, that's big Langley.
I dropped out to do comedy. Some of my handlers were able to help me get into a group called Cross Comedy with John Benjamin, who of course is MI6. And we started doing comedy, Cross Comedy, and that is where I met Janine Garofalo. I did a bunch of sitcoms, started directing, all just as a ruse to maintain my friendship with Janine, who I kept talking about politics with the idea that CIA would start Air America, which of course was not a coincidence that it was named after a CIA operation.
It's like they're taunting you, putting it right out in front of you.
Well, this is the way you do it. You hide in plain sight.
Mm-hmm.
So Janine asked me to come on Air America with her, all according to the plan. Spent a lot of time railing on the CIA, the FBI, Iraq War, et cetera, so that 15 years later, I could promote the CIA by saying that Jimmy Dore is an idiot and Glenn Greenwald pretending that Spotify is not a corporation and they're not paying Joe Rogan $100 million has been the goal of the CIA.
Well, you by just admitting this right now out in the open, it sounds like you're doing what your handlers told you to, which is hiding in plain sight.
Of course, that's why I do it. This is the way I throw people off the trail.
Speaking of Jimmy Dore.
This is a government issue. I don't even want to talk about Jimmy Dore today. Oh, my God. Really important, TD. Very important. It's already 2:30. We'll save it for tomorrow. Stu Pedantics. The Canadian Freedom Convoy ran again this week in several large Canadian cities, despite every province announcing last week that the few restrictions in place will be lifted soon. Now their gripe is that businesses have the right to restrict access to unvaccinated folks. I guess freedom now means the right to tell others what policies they can enact in their private business to maintain safe work investments.
Yeah, it's an anti-vaxxer revisionist movement, as far as I can tell. That the idea being that the governments did too much for people during the pandemic, and we need to get back to the status quo.
Callers, we're not going to have any time for any more calls. Let's just do this Charlie Kirk clip, and then we'll do. It's just too stupid. Here is Charlie Kirk on the Charlie Kirk Show. It was a couple days ago. He was discussing the recent jobs report, which incidentally, the backward revisions for the jobs report were massive. November and December got something like 300,000 or 400,000 more jobs than were initially reported. We're going to look into this more, but the head of BLS, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, is a fairly questionable guy. Those are massive undercounts of jobs. A lot of people had speculated because there's two different surveys. The household survey came out and said that the jobs numbers should have been closer to 500,000 as opposed to 150 or 180,000. So the jobs numbers are quite large. And they've been backward revised, but of course, the narrative sticks. Nevertheless, and maybe we'll go play some funny clips of Fox and Friends about that later. But here is Charlie Kirk asking his producer to pull up a data point for him. And whoops.
Wrong tab.
So if this data is true, it says January jobs report, payrolls jump by 467,000 as unemployment rate rises to 4%. U.S. employers added back far more jobs than expected in January, even as Omicron cases surges at the beginning of the year. So they say that the job reports are lovely. Now, this is what doesn't make any sense. Connor, can you get the headline from last week? No, that's me. I forgot my password. That's also me. I'm not going to say that on air, but I've forgotten passwords to all sorts of different. Let's just say I bought Bitcoin early, and I don't know where it went. I can't remember the password. It wasn't even me, actually. It was someone that donated it or something. I can't remember. It was this whole thing. It's just very complicated. So,
nice currency you have there.
Security.
Yeah, nice currency you have there, folks. Good luck with that. Forgot my password.
But
he'll find it.
So he says he bought Bitcoin early. Do we know if he's been promoting Bitcoin on his show?
Well, no, I don't think he would be because he doesn't have access to his.
Right. Just forgot his password. Can he? There's no recourse, no ability to change it?
No, I mean, that's the thing with those Bitcoin passwords is like, I've not really cared to learn much, but you can have like a passcode that you like have to write down and keep. And if you lose that, you're SOL.
Mm. But just keep in mind that people promoting Bitcoin or any kind of other crypto are likely people who also got in early but did not forget their passwords.
You know what would be a great currency? Majority Report merchandise. Majority Report mugs.
And you have no vested interest in promoting it, right?
I mean, I have some, but only because I use them as currency.
Yeah, it's decentralized.
Other people should get it.
And you can have it in your hand, unlike, actual money, right?
That's the thing is, so that's a good explanation of this when the libertarian crypto folks talk to you about security. There's two routes to security. There's one, the individual route of getting a super long password that you have to remember and keep safe, or just the state route, which is that if something goes wrong with your bank account, the government covers that for you.
All right, 10 more of these, then we're out of here. JT. Dear Sam, I recently signed up for a Twitch account through my mom's Amazon account, and I love the show, but after I signed into the Majority Report app, it, for some reason, did not show the full archive. Is there a way to get the full archive? You should be able to. Check the help desk or send us an email to majorityreporters@gmail.com. Illuminati kids. I think modern American Christianity may be a big impediment to tax-funded social safety nets on varying levels of active awareness of a good portion of congregants I grew up with. Saw them as an affront to God's will on some level, as tests from God are seen essential to life. Eesh, they've taught to prefer to have personal private charity deal with suffering after it happens than prevent it. And we should also say it doesn't work as addressing this stuff either. Kid tested, Politburo approved. NFT nonsense reminds me of those ads where you buy someone in a square foot of land in Scotland so you can be called the Lord. Those are, I'm going to do that as a gift, though. Love how seriously Joe is taking his role as Zordon of the IDW. Lane, the only NFTs I need are my precious pet Eurasian birdies. I love my nice effing tits. I don't know. Urban Swank. Dave Pacman promotes crypto scams. I don't know what that means either. Black left. Why do so many on the left frame elites in terms of CNN and MSNBC and not Fox 2? Taibbi will never criticize Fox for looking down on working class black Americans, but will accuse CNN and MSNBC of looking down on white working class.
Because it's a substitute for actual like Marxian class politics to talk about the elites that are liberals, because that's a way you can actually get a reactionary audience as well.
101 Long Gnomes. Isn't Ukraine asking to join NATO because they feel it will act as a deterrence against further Russian aggression? Why should the bully get to dictate the terms of how the victim defends itself? I don't think that we should be expanding NATO. I mean, from Ukraine's perspective, it might make some sense, but I don't think that we should be engaging in that.
I also don't think bullies and victims is really the right way to interpret a lot of these situations.
Train Boy, the future of Eastern Europe is a bunch of countries with functionally the same ruling ideology as Russia, all joining NATO against them because they are centered their entire national identity around an anti-Soviet partisan from 1942 named like Vyacheslav the Jew Slayer. Traffic cones. Sam, can you explain why you think NATO should be disbanded? I've never heard this take before, and I think you should would otherwise be considered NATO to be a big contributor to the relative peacefulness between major powers of the last few decades. Well, I think it had a function during the Cold War, but I'm not sure that that function is still operable. And I think, like, I'm okay with it being more of like a trade type of situation than a military alliance. I think the response to a threat should be commensurate with the threat. And I do not think that Russia has the ability to invade Europe anymore. And that's why. I mean, go back and we interviewed Stephen Wertheim about this 6 months ago? I can't remember.
We talked specifically about that.
Judy Ruliani. That is a very Caucasian looking Jesus in Bannon's room. 3 more.
Would you expect anything else?
Braves Robin. Emma's celebrity look-alike is Rory Gilmore from Gilmore Girls. Prove me wrong.
That's not true, but it's so sweet. I mean, I don't have blue eyes or dark hair, but that's very, like, the nice. Me as a child, obsessed with her, obviously, because I was a nerdy white girl, so that was that.
Sway Dartha. An article in The Atlantic referred to Joe Rogan as a sugar-coated red pill. Seems accurate. Aaron is not cool. Barely any centers. The 2 MVP frontrunners are centers. Matt.
Yeah, but not the post.
Yeah, but it's not like Roy Hibbert or something out there.
And the final I am of the day. Howdy, Major crew. To my folks being to the folks that might be new to the show. New to the show. I have some facts, descriptors of the crew, and some regular callers. Sam Seder is both the world's loudest whisperer and the world's quietest yeller. And the loudest yeller, he once saved himself from joining a strike by deflecting it with a winning lottery ticket. The odds. Emma Vigeland went to a sensory deprivation chamber and achieved ascendancy, but chooses to stay on a moral plane for sports. Also, she runs a massive gambling operation out of the MR Discord. Matt is immune to fall damage and can leap entire city blocks in a single bound, but doesn't believe it would reduce the need for public transportation policies. He has slammed the revolving door closed. Bradley has achieved enlightenment in 4 different religions and spun a fidget spinner back in 2015 that's still going. Never lost the game either. Nomiki was one of the people who put Stonehenge together. She determines how Dark Knight will be, pronouns she, her, Aquarius. John from San Antonio genetically engineered invisible bees with stingers to collect election data. That's where the buzzing noise keeps coming from. The phantom sensation of bugs crawling in you. Ronald Reagan can bench press the free press, but doesn't come out out of respect for the Fourth Estate. He has also done unspeakable things for a Klondike bar. Dave from Jamaica has mastered water, earth, fire, and air to become a fully realized avatar. Maybe one of the reasons for letting the dogs out, though not confirmed. Jeff from Georgia battles Florida man every night to save the world from a chaos of Apophis. To the third Egyptian mythology fans that got that reference, you're welcome. Every libertarian caller summary. I heard the other libertarian call in, and I don't think he had any good explanation of libertarianism. Here's my view that ultimately leads to neo-feudalism, where I hope to be part of the new nobility because I'm just better than you. Finally, I'm Kowalski from Nebraska. I grow corn, and now there's tractor emojis in the chat. Left is best.
Wow, Kowalski.
Matt, Bradley, Emma, great job today. See you folks tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there.